to enjoy the peace and the comfort that you have blessed us with and provided us over these years. And we ask these things in the name of Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Bliss. Pastor Bliss is with the Good Shepherd Fellowship Chapel here in Bountiful. Thank you for that lovely prayer. Well, you're wondering what I'm doing here. So do I at times. Mayor Lewis is not in town, and they have a member of the Bountiful City Council be the mayor pro tem while he is gone, and that fell to me this day. So I will be acting mayor as we go through the city council meeting. We now will open up to a public comment section. If you would like to make a comment, we ask that you come to the mic, and we ask that you limit your contact at the mic and comments to 2 minutes. And we take notes, and staff takes notes of what you have said, and then we can get back with you as to your comments. But we ask if you would limit your comments to 2 minutes, and we'll take the first 10 minutes of our meeting for comments. So the floor is yours. And please state your name and address. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mary Christensen, and I live at 376 West, 3100 South. And I did attend the planning meeting earlier, and I just wanted to make a comment about the 50% green space or open space requirements. And there was a lot of mention of aesthetic, the aesthetic pleasure of those open spaces. But there are other reasons, and they covered storm drains in particular for the open space and non-paved areas of yards. And in particular, I just wanted to mention the ecological health of the city, insect life, bird life. Those things require plants and green space. Sorry. To flourish. And in that way, if a neighbor, even a neighbor whose yard you never see, has paved the whole front of their yard or even a significant portion, it can impact your yard and your property. Just something for the consideration of the council that I didn't hear addressed.
Thank you, Mary. Thanks. Any further comments?
Donette Dial. I live at 92 West 800 North. I'm actually here for the high school parking, but I did want to say something about the Bountiful City Beautiful Home and Gardens. I am aware that there are many beautiful homes, and the majority are, but maybe take a drive west of Main or west of 2nd. Those pictures I saw are very common to many of the houses in that area. And you look at what's called the ghost house west of Viewmont High. I don't know how that's still standing. Apartments, businesses are nearly all concrete, and they're addressing, or their parking concerns are addressed, but they're the bigger tax base. That's kind of how it feels a little bit on that. And I just would say maybe to look at other cities that maybe have less than a 50% green area and see how their storm drainage goes, and maybe take that into consideration. Maybe little less than 50 would still work. As far as the high school parking goes, we're just here, a few of us are here just to make sure that some things are followed through on and to see how that goes as well. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. If there be no further comments, I'll close this section. We'll move on with our council meeting. We'll go to item number 3. Ask for a motion to approve the minutes of our previous meeting held on August 7th, 2018. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Councilman Knight. Council reports. Can we start with Richard?
Nothing to report this evening, thank you.
Mark?
I don't have a report. Thank you.
Beth?
I do not have a report either. Thank you very much.
Kendallin?
Nothing. Thanks.
Well, thank you for letting me report on
It's summer.
endless summer nights. It was absolutely wonderful. The Beach Boy tribute was over the top. Dancing was wonderful. And the cars from the 50s that were there were very nice, and they let us park the cars on the lawn. which was very nice. So it was a wonderful, wonderful night, and I encourage you next year to come to those wonderful concert in the parks. It's beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Let's move on. Item number 5, consider the approval or weekly expenses greater than $1,000 paid on July 30th, 31st, August 6th, 7th, 13th, 14th, 15th of this year. Any comment or discussion?
Mr. Mayor, if there's none, I'd be happy to make a motion that we approve those expenditures and also adopt the June 2018 preliminary financial report.
I'll second that, but I do have one question. One of the expenses on the last page was the fisheye camera for City Hall West Lobby. Is that just a camera for the lobby of City Hall, or that's not a camera for one of the
Yes, that's just a
meeting
security
rooms?
camera that faces the west foyer.
faces like the doors?
Correct.
Okay.
Great, now everybody knows.
That would also, and it would also be the installation costs and everything else that goes with it, so
So is that already installed?
I don't know the answer.
I'm just wondering about with the remodel, if,
Yeah, I think it's replacing an existing camera
oh, okay.
that's gone out, and so, yeah.
Yeah, can't not have security.
So we'll be able to recover
We'll just
a lot
use
of
it.
that equipment.
Yeah.
Good
Okay.
question.
Thanks.
So we've had a motion. A
Nice second. Mhm.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It was unanimous. Let's move on to item number 6. Consider the approval of removal of the existing no parking during school hour signs near Bountiful and Viewmont High Schools. We'll turn the time over to Chief Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight and to talk about this very important issue. As you're well aware, there have been many discussions on this topic for at least the last few years, if not off and on over a 20-plus year period of time, and I can only imagine not being at the table 22 years ago when leading up to putting the signs in the first place. I can only imagine what some of those discussions were at the time, and probably many of the same issues were being talked about as far as our youth and some of the activities that were happening and some of the impacts that were occurring. This has been a long process. I think there are many strong feelings on all sides of this, whether you're a property owner that currently has no parking school signs, a property owner who would like to have no parking school signs, or students or parents of students and that are unhappy with what we're doing with school signs and some of the enforcement that's occurred over the years. To give a little background, on July 10th, the Traffic Safety Committee discussed the status of the on-street parking situation around our two high schools, Bountiful and Viewmont High. And a date was set to hold a public meeting to discuss those issues. A 3-hour meeting was held on August 16th, where many of the affected residents attended and voiced concerns and ideas for going forward. Apologize, I've got a frog in my throat. So, as mentioned already, for more than 20 years, the city has attempted to mitigate the impacts of student parking, the city and the school district, student parking on public streets in front of private residents by installing no parking during school hours signs. These signs have only been marginally effective in reducing the nuisances, but have also pushed the parking problem to streets farther from the schools. With Farmington High being created and a change in the school boundaries, it was felt that now would be a good time to review the problem and possibly implement some changes. In the Traffic Safety Committee meeting, a recommendation was made to remove the no parking signs after holding a public meeting where the affected residents could voice their concerns, frustrations, agreements, etc. Hence the meeting on the 16th. Over the period of a few hours, residents expressed concerns about litter, noise, immoral activity, lack of parental oversight, safety, We heard comments about drugs and all kinds of behavior that would be offensive to many in our community. They also talked about blocked driveways, blocked fire hydrants, and moving garbage cans being blocked at times that the garbage is being picked up. They repeatedly mentioned disrespect by some of the students, disregard for the signs and traffic laws, and the disappointment and the lack of enforcement of the no parking signs, which were originally installed with the understanding that the enforcement by the police department would be limited, if any at all. And for those that weren't part of these discussions, I was an officer on the street when we had that information passed on to us from our department administrators at the time. And I remember, as others, questioning in our own minds, it's how are we going to deal with this, knowing that the only reason that we'll be there is somebody calling us about a problem, and the signs are either the remedy or an action that they expect us to take. Overall, the majority of residents that spoke expressed frustration that this nuisance situation and others have remained after 2 decades with the no parking signs. There was also a general consensus that something new should be tried. At the conclusion of the meeting and after discussing some possible solutions mentioned by the residents, I presented a proposal which was an expansion of the recommendation made by the Traffic Safety Committee. And this has really been based, it's not me solely, but several discussions that have occurred with city staff, police department members, as well as residents in bringing some of these ideas forward. Although a few in attendance spoke in favor of keeping and indeed keeping the signs and expanding the number of signs, there was general agreement that some type of proposal, if there were commitments and agreements with the school district as well, that there would be willing to try that or look at that. Again, with much trepidation and worry about what this means and what this looks like down in the future. So the recommendation that is being forwarded to you for as part of this approval, if you choose to remove the no parking signs, that we would establish 2 neighborhood working groups, one for Viewmont High and one for Bountiful High. These working groups would include residents, the school administrations themselves, the police department, and students, in being able to talk about ongoing issues or make recommendations, or to maybe even just bring ideas forward that might improve or enhance the situation that we currently have. Both neighborhoods would meet again in a public setting in January of 2019, so about halfway through the year, to be able to see what's working and see how things are going at that time. We would have our school resource officers, my proposal, and this could change, was that they meet with our driver's ed classes and actually talk about the parking issue specifically. Some of the comments that came out of our public meeting is that there may be a better classroom setting to do that and affect more students, and we're certainly willing to have that discussion with the school administration. So at the end of the day, there would at least be discussions with our school resource officers, with students, specifically on the parking issues in some of the problems that have come from that. Mayor Lewis had previously suggested and recommended to myself and others, and I'm in agreement with, that we meet with the student body officers, from both Beaumont and Bountiful High, and talk to them about this potential, if this change occurs, how significant this is and how important it is that our students become part of the solution and help police this area in reducing the negative impacts on our residents. And then by narrowing the numbers of streets down, we would take increased enforcement specifically in 3 areas, and this was talked about multiple times by residents. And due to the public safety impact and need, we feel strongly from the city that we should do this. So in leading up to this, we would send the notices home to the parents and the students so they're aware of it. But in situations where students are blocking driveways, blocking fire hydrants, or the intersection, they're too close to the intersection, making it dangerous for people trying to merge onto other roadways, we would tow the vehicles. We would not spend time trying to locate students and call them out and have them come move cars. We'll tow the vehicles. And I feel that that's a very reasonable request. We don't easily go that direction, as you're well aware, but keep in mind that a lot of the feedback has been narrow roadways to begin with, and then adding parking along the sides of both, being able to get a fire truck or ambulance in. We know that this in and of itself doesn't solve all that, but by all means, we ought to be able to keep hydrants open and be able to hook up to hydrants and deal with fire issues. And then as those residents are trying to merge out onto the highway or to other roadways, they should have the ability to see clearly what's on either side. From the meeting and some conversations that have occurred even since, and not some from residents, some from even some of our own employees at the police department, there's some other things I think we can do to help. If the vote is to remove the signs during the week following or for some period of time following, I myself and my administrators will spend time in the mornings as kids are coming to school talking to them about how significant this change is and how beneficial this can be to them, but they need to reciprocate and in return help us in ensuring that our residents are not being unfairly impacted with some of the things that have occurred. It would give us an opportunity in uniform to be out there in a very proactive, positive way in talking to our kids about the benefits of this change if it goes forward in that manner. We will also be pushing the school district and the schools specifically, Bountiful and Viewmont. We've had conversations before, but we need to be more emphatic, I think, in demanding that students do not lose their parking based on use or other minor discipline issues. Our parking lot should always be available for parking as the number one priority and the number one best location for our kids to park. And anything that deters from that just puts them out into the residential neighborhoods, we have got to be able to change that. Now, as I mentioned with a lot of the residents, and I think, those that are even here tonight, we know that some of these things are still conversations that have to be worked out. And, but I feel strongly that by doing it in a positive, proactive way with everyone at the table, that we can continue to make some changes going forward, and that would be one of the requests, or one of the things that we would insist on. We've also already had made changes with garbage pickup, so now garbage pickup occurs on late start days, so we try to get that done before schools are started. The school district has improved the parking spaces at both our schools. I want to say about 125 parking stalls have been increased at Viewmont, and roughly 75 have been increased at Bountiful High. There's been input from residents that believe that much more could be done in that area, and I think that's conversations that we should continue having with the school district. But we certainly want to look to maximize those parking areas. And but I want to be clear, and especially with residents that are here behind me, and allowing them to have trust in those of us that are going to be dealing with this and trying to find this balance. I'm not standing in front of you and anyone else if the decision is to remove the signs saying that that's going to solve all of our problems. We all know that there are people in our communities that create significant issues for neighbors and residents, and that's probably still going to happen. What we're talking about is having a better way to get those that are in that mass more of the central area that may not really think much about this or realize what it is like to live next to a school, a high school, to create that awareness and that education, and in the same time say that this is a benefit to you, in hopes that we can bring them along in trying to build that and develop that. I also know that the very request of us asking you to remove those signs causes great distress for some of our residents. And it's important for you to know publicly from me that I would not be making that, and I don't believe any of the others that have also agreed. If it weren't for this very important issue that has to be at least recognized by the council if we choose not to remove signs. We cannot make the decisions based on what happens, how we're sitting today, because we already have two streets, 550 South and 1400 North, that will be petitioning you to add signs to their roads. That's been an ongoing conversation for at least two plus years. I've also been told by a couple of residents that if they get signs, 1450 is likely going to be in asking for signs, as well as Mill Creek Way. That's the reason I've made the comment, is I don't think we can sign our way out of this problem. At some point, the kids become pushed so far out that it's easier just to break the law, and if you're going to break the law, you're going to park right in front of the homes of the people closest to the school and risk that. That is not a positive solution. So I have the responsibility to look at 44,000 people, including the residents that live around these schools, trying to find a balance. And as Gary and Paul and those of us that have been charged with really having these meetings and these discussions and coming up with solutions, we feel that the option that we are proposing is the best option of what may still be difficult options. But at least we're all in it together, and I can tell you my workload doesn't get easier. You heard me read from the things that I'm committed to doing. My workload increases, but if this has the positive impact that I do believe it can have, it is worth it. And maybe we can start to tone down what is a very, very tense, difficult environment for all involved in those areas. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions from the council?
Excuse me. May I?
Please.
Chief, thank you very much for that report, and thank you for your work on this. I know this is not an easy subject and in any way, and I know that there's not the perfect solution, but I appreciate you trying to work to find a better alternative solution long term. Part of the recommendation is indicated in here that although few in attendance spoke in favor of keeping it and indeed expanding it, the general agreement was the proposal was acceptable if the school district would also participate. What has been the response from the school district thus far? Could you maybe let us know a little bit about that?
Yes. So at the August 16th meeting, a representative, Scott Zigich, was here at the meeting. He wasn't here presenting, but he did come up towards the end of the meeting and speak just for a few minutes. There's some other issues that the school district is actively working on. We believe that I'm trying to be careful how I say this because the school district's really negotiating this, but we believe that we could have expanded parking area at both of our churches, that are the one close right off of Chapel Drive and 1000 North, and then the one just east of the football field at Bountiful High. There have been ongoing discussions for well over a year that I feel are very positive towards this being resolved. We will continue to be part of that conversation and encourage that. Some of these issues about school, how you deal with the student with use and the parking, we have brought those up before. I think what we have now is this opportunity with this working group as we communicate that they will hear actively from the residents that are part of that group. It's not going to be all the residents. Obviously, the group has to be small enough and manageable enough that we can schedule meetings without too much difficulty. But the school district is motivated by this. They have spent money to expand parking. I know for a fact that even part of the discussions leading up to the Farmington High school being built, part of the reasons behind it was the parking issues. Bountiful, we have older schools that have been in place for many, many years, and at that time, not everyone owned the number of vehicles that we have today. One piece I didn't say that I do also want to talk about is, but the school district has been encouraging and sending the emails to the parents about carpooling. This will give us an opportunity as we talk directly with the kids and as my SRO, school resource officers, talk with students to encourage carpooling as well. We would like to believe as residents and as the city that there's got to be a way to recognize students that are willing to do that. There's got to be some benefit that maybe can be put in place, and I think everyone knows that time is short, and to work everything out would probably delay this longer than it should be, and we do feel we need to take advantage of the reduced populations in our schools and start this on a different discussion point and different level. So the district will be part of it, and I know from individuals that can't speak on behalf of the district leaders at the top, they're very motivated to try to find ways to improve this, and they are lockstep in what we're doing. They appreciate what's being done based on also believing it's the best direction to go.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I'm glad they were involved, and I just think it's important that we keep reminding them and that they feel the pressure as well to, that it's not just a meeting we had and now it's done, that they know it's a continued conversation of looking actively for more parking at their schools.
And that's been a lot of the feedback from the residents as well, as they believe that more can be done in that area, and they've already made some suggestions to us, and I think there'll be an opportunity for those suggestions to go forward to the school as well.
I like the recommendation of awarding or rewarding and some honor, mention, whatever you guys ultimately determine, the students who do choose to carpool or make other accommodations so that they're not contributing to a problem. So I like that idea. I think that that's a good positive incentivification.
And you know, by getting the student body officers involved and even having students as part of these working groups, I think the kids are going to have some suggestions and ideas too that we may not have even thought about that could be very beneficial in this.
I'd like to, on the recommendations, I'd like to just make sure that number 1 point that says the Bountiful Police Department established 2 neighborhood working groups, 1 for each school. I would just like to, if we can just add including the school district or the school administration, just so they're always in the loop with those meetings.
I think that can be done. Obviously, they're a separate entity, but I know from the conversations that I've had with the schools directly that they are very willing, and they have been part of the discussions and meetings at times in the past. They're willing to be involved in this, especially if we're doing something significant in trying to address this. I think everybody has some renewed faith and is a little more optimistic that maybe we can make this better.
Thank you.
Questions from the council? Comments? Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I'll make a motion that we grant approval of the removal of the existing no parking during school hour signs near Bountiful and Viewmont High School with the recommendations as listed by Chief Ross.
Have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
I just have a comment. I feel for these residents, as I'm sure we all do. These are some of my neighbors that I love. I grew up right there, and I feel for them. I know it's not easy dealing with this, but I hope that you know that we are trying to do something because what we have been doing hasn't been working, and so we are trying to. We're trying to make changes that can be proactive, that can make things better. And so I just want to tell you, I'm sorry. I know that it is tough, the situation you're in, and I feel for you. I've heard from a lot of people on this, but I think to do what we've done before, the status quo, it's not working. So I just think we've got to try something new.
Well said.
Had a second? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you, council. I know this was not an easy decision that we made. Thank you. Could we move on to item number 7? Consider approving the ordinance 2018-07 regarding travel and training personnel use expenditures. Mr. Tyson Beck, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to discuss this. The ordinance before you is being brought because of a specific code in the section of the Utah Code. The section in question is section 11-57, and it's entitled Personal Use Expenditures for Political Subdivision Officers and Employees. And this was passed in the 2017 legislative session. This specific code section takes in essence, wants to prohibit any personal use expenditures with public funds. Now this would be intentional use of public funds for personal use. And so anything that's unintentional is exempt in this section of code. So if someone accidentally swipes a city purchase card instead of their own purchase card, this would not fall under that category. This would be, this code section is specific to intentional use of city funds. So what this code section talks about is it talks about an expenditure made without the authority of law, and it actually stipulates that when there is an intentional use of city funds with the intention to use it for personal expenditures, that there is a 50% penalty on that charge. So the employee that used public funds for personal use would have to pay 50% of the cost back to the city as an administrative penalty. So let me give you just a couple examples of how the city has traditionally had personal use expenditures with public funds that actually would fall under this category under the state code. So if a city employee uses a purchase card for airfare for a training conference, and they happen to be booking the airfare for a spouse or a relative flying with them, and they used a public purchase or a city purchase card for that combined expenditure, even though they may reimburse the city for the personal use side, that type of an expenditure would be prohibited under the state code. Another example might be if the city pays for a hotel stay, where the city employee and their family stay one extra night beyond the conference or the training, and they stay that one extra night, and that night's stay gets paid by a city check or a city purchase card. This would be an intentional use of city funds for personal purposes. So those are the types of examples that we're talking about here. The city has always had a policy where they don't allow city employees to purchase things on charge accounts. So like our charge accounts at Home Depot or Lowe's or Ace Hardware, employees are not allowed to use our charge accounts for personal expenditures. The main reason being is when we're charged on our account, we're sales tax exempt, and the transactions would not have any sales tax if they were charging that on our account. So the city employees have always known that that's not an option. They're not allowed to charge on our Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever it might be, charge account. So we're specifically talking here about travel and training and city employees' use of public funds for travel and training. So currently, when we were made aware of this legislation, we told employees to do their very best to segregate personal use and city use for any travel and training that they would do. So they would they're trying their best to purchase an airline ticket for themselves and then simultaneously go back in and purchase one for a family member who might be traveling with them. If we've basically told them that if it's not an option, the provider will simply not allow them to segregate the costs and pay for it with two different types of methods of payment, that they pay for everything on their personal credit card and then get reimbursed by the city. And so that's the way we're currently operating. And we've run into a few different issues with this current operation that we wanted to address so that the efficiency of the employee booking their travel and training can be improved, as well as maintaining our travel and training costs at a minimum level. So what's been difficult is we've found that there are many providers who will not segregate the services provided. So they won't allow you to book two airline tickets right next to each other in different transactions. You literally have to go in and go book everything twice, and whether you're able to get a seat next to your family member or not is in question. We've also found, and this is something that has always been on our minds, is that because the city is tax exempt, we don't have to pay sales tax and we don't have to pay lodging taxes. So whenever an employee goes out to do travel and training, they're able to stay the night without any sales tax and without any lodging taxes. However, if an employee uses their own personal credit card to pay for that lodging or the airfare, that we, in that case, are not sales tax exempt. The tax commission requires that if the employee uses their own personal funds rather than public funds, that they have to pay sales tax. And that's not something that we can request reimbursement from the state. So the city is actually missing out on sales tax and lodging taxes whenever an employee pays for it with their own personal credit card. So that's another thing that has been on our minds and is of concern. So the ordinance that's before you tonight is an option for us to authorize employees a 14-day grace period where they can book personal uses for travel and training as long as they pay back the personal use to the city within a 14-day window. If they don't meet that 14-day window, they would then have to pay that 50% penalty as stipulated by state code. But this would allow the employee to have that 14-day grace period. Historically, before this was enacted, the city did this on a very regular basis. It does create efficiency for employees while they're booking their travel. They don't have to go and book things twice, and it does improve their speed while they're booking. And again, as I mentioned, we want to make sure that we keep our travel and training costs as low as possible. And when we're paying sales tax and lodging taxes, that does add to our costs. So the ordinance proposes that we stay with state code, making sure that there are no personal use expenditures with city funds, and we just give them we give employees a grace window of 14 days to pay it back, and so we're making sure that the city is fully reimbursed, and in almost all of the cases, the city actually gets paid by the employee with their reimbursement long before we actually have to pay the bill. So whenever we charge an account on a hotel or something like that, the employee will come and pay long before we have to pay that bill. Or our purchase cards, we have a 30-day window before we have to pay those. So again, employees have been reimbursing the city long before we've ever had to pay the liability. So in essence, we're just allowing employees a 14-day window to reimburse the city for personal use expenditures and still avoiding a 50% penalty. We don't want to make employees pay $50 for booking a $100 airplane ticket. And so we would like to allow this as an option for employees. So that's the gist of the ordinance, and be happy to answer any questions or specific areas you might have concerns on.
Tyson, thank you. I did have a quick question and just maybe a clarification question. So the 14-day grace period, if you will, before the administrative penalty kicks in, would be after the date that the request, the transaction was completed, or after the date of notification? I just want to clarify that.
Correct, yeah. So it would be from the date that they made the purchase. So whenever they swiped the card or whenever they incurred the liability on the charge account for the city, the day they did that, it would be 14 days from that point.
Thank you. That's what I suspected, but I thought good to make that.
So I had a question about, you said intentionally as opposed to like just accidentally you swipe a card or whatever, but I don't really understand why intentionally needs to be there. If the employee makes a purchase, whether or not it was intentional, then you would have the same ramifications, right? You would have the same.
Yeah, from a city's perspective, it's true. Regardless, they would always reimburse the city for anything personal.
Right.
But from the state code perspective, they're basically saying if you accidentally swipe the wrong card, and so you're at a gas station and you swipe Bountiful City purchase card instead of your own credit card, that was purely an accident. It had no preconceived intent to use city funds for a personal benefit, and so the state code is just trying to differentiate and say we're not trying to penalize accidents. We're trying to keep people from using city funds or public funds intentionally. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So for me, the most important sentence of this whole presentation was under the old operating policy, employees were very good at reimbursing the city for personal expenditures, and in the majority of instances, those were made well before the city's bill was due. So we thank our legislature for solving a problem that we didn't have, and now we thank you for resolving that problem so that the city does not have to incur additional costs with travel and lodging taxes. And I'd be happy to make a motion if you're ready, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Any further discussion? Let's hear the motion.
That we adopt ordinance 2018-07, implementing the grace period that Tyson discussed and that is printed out for us here on the credit card policy.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It was unanimous. Thank you.
Just to reiterate, Bountiful employees were paying this back already.
Yes.
This isn't we got caught and now they're paying us back.
Correct.
As has happened with some of the semi or non-governmental organizations that Mr. Dougal has found fault with. So anyway, thank you.
Good clarification on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's move on to item number 8. Consider approval of pro-built construction bid for the construction of the Holbrook Booster Station. Let's turn the time over to Lloyd Cheney to clarify
Lloyd,
this. For us.
thanks for thinking ahead and getting equipment lined up before the project starts.
Thank you.
That's pretty cool.
You know, we've been really busy spending a lot of the water department's budget on some fairly large improvements. Just to give you a quick update, we're doing the final testing on the 4th North Reservoir. We'll go tomorrow morning and take a final reading to make sure that the tank has sealed itself up and it's not just leaking water out the bottom randomly. But in order to use that tank, we need to have a good way to put water into it, and that is the genesis for the Holbrook Booster Station. That's going to be built on the field next to the Holbrook Elementary School. It's actually property that's owned by the city that the school uses as playground. The site is going to be off to the west side and down the hill closer to the road, so it won't be up near the top flat area where the kids play a lot. We had a bid opening a week ago, and this is pretty noteworthy, I think, to mention that we had 9 bidders. I can't remember the last bid opening in recent memory where we had 9 companies interested in a project, and we felt like our prices were pretty good. Your engineer's estimate, though, wasn't quite where it should have been. It's a good thing the engineering department doesn't have to build this. We'd be going in the hole. Besides talking about ProBuild Construction and their bid for $288,220 to build the booster station itself. I wanted to talk about the project as a whole, because this booster station itself is not just the total expense. And we've had other expenses in installing a new pump line to pump water up to the new reservoir, and that's just recently been completed. But to build the pump station itself, there are some specialized pieces of equipment that go in there, one of which is the pump cans that was described in the memo. That's basically just a big steel tube that sits down in the ground that the pump sits in. But you can't build a pump station until you have these pump cans, because they kind of have to go in the ground first. So we went ahead and ordered those, have those on hand. They're at the water department now, just waiting to be used. But another very important item is the actual controls. And when you have several booster stations and pump stations and well houses like we do, you like to be able to standardize that equipment so that you don't have to inventory 27 different kinds of the same Canooter valve, to make things run. And that is part of this memo tonight, that the motor control panels that we propose to install in this project are of similar build and construction and component to those that we already have in place on our other facilities. The company that has built those in the past for us has submitted the price of $31,780 for those two panels. In addition to those panels, we have the real heart and soul of the booster station, and that's the motors and the pump equipment itself, the things that actually move the water up the hill to the new reservoir. Now, this is a little bit interesting. There's not a lot of suppliers for this equipment. I mean, there are a few. The city's dealings in the past, the water department is very confident that Nickerson Company has been, kind of the supplier recently, and they have supplied the best price. Now, we are in process of getting prices from other suppliers for these motors. They're 100 horsepower motors. It's going to pump about 800 gallons a minute, but we'll have the ability to vary that flow a little bit depending on the demand. But we're pretty confident that Nickerson's price is going to come in at the low end. If it doesn't, then obviously we'd have a lesser expense to equip that new booster station. So if you go down to the summary and the significant impacts, when you include the booster station, the pump cans, the motor control panels, and the pumps and the motors, we have about almost $385,000 in expense, of which $350,000 was budgeted in the current budget year. So we're a little bit short, but we're confident that we can make that up from the existing budget in other areas. Be happy to answer any questions you have about that.
Any question from the council?
None. Be happy to make a motion, though, that we approve the contracts with the companies as outlined, with the exception of if you get better pricing than Nickerson for your pump and motor assemblies, for a cost of $384,772 for the new booster station at Hannah Holbrook.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're going to keep you right there, aren't we?
I think that's the plan.
Our next item, consider approval of the Downtown Plaza site plan. It's yours again, Lloyd.
Thank you. Let's see if this works. Hey, how about that? So I'm a rookie at using the projector in doing this, so please forgive me.
That's okay. We'll hold up our scores at the end.
Okay.
Paul and Chad both like to drive if you want to turn that thing over to them. Just saying.
I'd have to see their identification first.
Oh,
You may recognize this graphic as one of the site plans for the downtown plaza. And we've been working very hard over the last few months to put the design documents together, and we have a schedule with Hogan Construction for all of the subconsultants to submit what we are calling a draft set of construction documents just a couple days after the holiday. About a week later, we hope to have things cleaned up and ready to hand to Hogan, who's our construction manager, general contractor, so that they can begin the bidding process, and they anticipate having a bid opening on the 27th of September.
Cool.
So we're very close to breaking out some shovels and turning some dirt on this project. It's been very exciting. So I wanted to start here and just walk you through a few of the things that as staff and as our consultants we've felt were vital to this first phase of the plaza. Now, if we had an unlimited amount of resources, you would see other things here. But you know that we're constrained by a budget, and we intend to stay within that budget. We're all committed to that, and we're working feverishly to maintain that. The original scope of the project had improvements that went up and down First South and along First East, and you'll remember that Second South had the potential to be realigned with a little curve in it and a lot of nice improvements on both sides. As we started doing our estimates, we realized that we were really not going to be able to afford a lot of that. And so we have reduced the scope of the project to basically the exterior of this block. So the north side of Second South, the west side of First East, and the south side of First South. Just quickly, we'll walk you through this this graphic and point out some things, and then we'll get to some better graphics that I think you'll really catch the vision of what we're trying to do. These two buildings over here, if you'll remember back to the previous concepts, it was envisioned as a restroom where people who wanted to use the water feature could go change, and also it could be a restroom for activities that would be held on the plaza, and keeping people from patronizing the restrooms in the businesses on Main Street. We've been able to separate it into two buildings, and the smaller building over here is a proposed concession stand and storage for the plaza. So there would be a vendor there that could provide some services. The larger building would be the restroom. It would have men's and women's restrooms on the north side. On the south side would be some changing rooms only. They wouldn't have any toilets or sinks or anything like that, but just a place to go change, put on your swimsuit. In between those two would be a stairway that would go down into a basement, and the basement would hold all the treatment equipment for the water feature. So we're trying to capitalize on existing footprint to house that equipment. This area right here you can see in blue, that is the large water feature, and we have some really good graphics of that. It's a series of pools with some big blocks, big granite blocks that people can sit on and splash their feet, or some of them will have water coming out of them. It'll be neat. There's a continuous water feature that will run from here around this block, which is the stage. This is the shade for the stage, and we have some graphics of that. But this linear water feature will vary in width and in depth as it runs along the west side of First East. It's going to start at a fountain right here on the corner, and that will be where that starts from, just like a stream bubbling up from a spring and then finding its way down to the lake. It's kind of that concept. This purple area right here is the soft fall surfacing adjacent to a climbing wall. It'll be about 6 feet tall. We have a lot of landscaped area out here for concerts, for people to gather in, and the stage will be oriented so that it faces out into that landscaped area. We've included 3 steps on the very front of that stage, so you could have a choir or, a large body of people and have some staged, staggered areas so you could see them as they perform. Thought that was a good idea and a nice transition up to the stage. This green area here to the south is going to be constructed as a landscaped area for now, but eventually it's envisioned as being a skating rink with refrigerated ice. But right now that's a little bit out of the budget, so we'll just have to wait for that one to come into focus. We are going to stub utilities in to this area right here for a future concession stand and an equipment room for that refrigerated ice. So this is a view looking west, kind of along the stage, back towards the big water feature right here. You can see the concession building with its shade structure, and the restroom building with the shade structure on the west side of it. And this is the shade structure over the stage. So you'd be able to hang a background or something on this wire if you wanted to have some kind of a performance. Eventually we'd be able to hang lights from this. And we imagine, well, we're preparing for the future with some conduits going out into the landscaped area. So if we had a concert, they could bring in a mixing board and, adjust the sound so it would be the way it needs to be. Here's more of a view looking directly north, so you can see these pools, and the water would start in this pool right up here, right next to these upper blocks, and flow down and across these level weirs. It'd be about 4 inches deep at its deepest point, but taper out to just about 0 as it flow over the edge. This is a fireplace, and we haven't really landed on this being its exact location, but we're imagining this as a place for people to sit and just enjoy the atmosphere. We're going to use some of the Stoker School bricks to build this. We don't have a lot, but we have a few. I think we have enough to do that and a little bit more. Another view. Here's kind of an aerial. Here's the stream as it comes around the corner. And these decorative areas you see right here are a tile that we want to put in places that are going to be wet. One of the problems we have up at Creekside Park next to the creek is that the grass is literally just washed away from kids in and out of the creek. And these pavers will allow a more durable surface as those wet feet go in and out 50 million times. One of the things that I asked the designer to include was a pump. At Creekside we have those old-fashioned pumps. Well, we don't have exactly that model of pump. We have something a little bit similar. And I think we'll see those in a minute. But here's kind of the idea. The water in the big water feature comes up right out of this edge and cascades over in these 3 pools and then disappears into the drain. As the creek comes around along the south side of First South, there will be these little runnels for the kids to play in, so it'll spread the kids out a little bit. And they can dam it up and it can flow around and not really hurt anything. Another overhead view. If you look closely right here, you can see these 2 pipes right here. Those are what they call a mushroom pump, and they stand about, maybe 30 inches high, and they have a rounded dome head on them, so the kids can stand there and push on that. We'll see how long they last. Hopefully it'll be better. This is where the water's going to run out into these cascading pools. We're also imagining some jets. These are shown up here in the tile pavers, but we've actually talked more about including them down here in this first tier so that you don't have some kids coming over here and standing on them and spraying everybody who's standing there watching everybody else have fun. There you go. Those are the 2 pumps right there. I just want to talk about the lighting for a minute. The mood of the park is really, or the plaza, it's not a park, it's a plaza, is really important. And we're lucky to have somebody who really understands how important that is. And this is kind of the concept. Back against the Creative Arts Academy, the light is very bright. It's that hotter white light. We're imagining a little cooler light out in the plaza. With some focus up on the stage. So if the stage were lit up, that was kind of an indication of how bright it would be compared to the rest of it in the evening. I'm just going to go through these quickly. These are some of the concepts we've kind of thought about. Some lighting around the seating, some uplighting under the shade structures, and hopefully some lighting that can change colors, not just white, but with the LED technology, we should be able to incorporate some colors into things. Now these are the things that I like looking at the most. You can see the linear LED lighting up under these tiers in the cascading pools. You can see these bubblers that are illuminated. There are some LED lights in the steps over by the stage. And we've had quite the debate about these acrylic LED light balls, whether or not we like those out there. That one's still up for discussion, but just for a kind of a point of reference. One of the things that they're including is what they call moonlighting, and that's suspending some lights between the trees that would cast a pattern or shadow down on the sidewalk. In the wintertime, it would appear as though the light was coming from the moon through the leaves, but it would just accentuate that in the summertime. Another view of the fountain. Eventually, I don't know that we'll be able to afford it right now, but eventually we could retrofit these LED lights and program them so that they would be multicolored. In fact, the landscape architect said you could program it so that as the water came out of the fountain down on the southeast corner of the plaza, that it would appear to turn red as it came to the north and then turned west like a river of lava or something like that. And, you know, it could be fun. You could do all kinds of colors. So if Bountiful High won their football game, you could turn it red. If Viewmont won, you know, you could turn it gold or something, yeah. If Woods Cross won, I guess you could turn it blue, if you wanted to. Here's kind of a nighttime vision of the concession stand and the restroom. This is kind of interesting, the lighting on the building itself. The idea was to have that neon light experience, but this wouldn't necessarily be neon, it would be LEDs. There's some really cool technology out now that's be much more durable and cost that you could afford to do. So these are examples of that LED lighting, even though it looks like it's good old-fashioned neon. Okay, just want to show you a couple more pictures of the concession and restroom building. Not quite as fancy as those others, but to kind of give you the idea.
Lloyd, can you talk about the grass areas there? This is a view looking from west to east, with First South on your left.
Over here? Yeah.
Can you talk about those patches and how they relate to the farmers market and
Right.
things?
These patches of landscape are places where you could put 10 by 10 tents for farmers market or other gatherings, you know, say like for all the vendors that come to the tour of Utah, those kinds of things. We intend to have power wired into those places so they could have that. We also have a spot for the food trucks that I didn't mention. That's kind of on the west side. Well, it'd be just about where you're standing in the plaza right here. The food truck area would be just a little bit to your right, but that would be wired also for the food trucks to have power and would be on a graveled surface, not on concrete or asphalt, because it's just a little easier to contain the mess that comes with the food trucks.
It's not, did you say gravel or isn't it crushed granite?
Crushed granite.
Yeah, they call it decomposed granite. It's only decomposed because it's been mechanically decomposed.
Each of those grass pads, from an overhead view, hold about 4 tents. So there's quite a bit of room there for vendor tents, and then of course we'd maintain all the shade from those trees, and so pretty neat space there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of hard space that you could locate more tents onto. So we should have plenty of capacity. We've had that discussion. Do we have enough spots for farmers market or not? And based on the counts that Chad's done, we feel pretty comfortable that there is plenty of room and room to grow around the site for them, and that it'll be a great site. Do you have any questions? Be happy to answer them.
Is there a plan for Wi-Fi?
We have not really talked about having Wi-Fi down there at this point. I don't know why we couldn't, other than we couldn't afford it right now. That is probably the biggest issue.
We are installing conduit as a loop all the way around the park for future improvements, whether that be lighting or any, sound, anything else that we want to be able to add in the future that we can do so cheaply without having to dig things up, in anticipation of being able to add things as we go.
Yes, so from each of these planters, there would be a ring of conduit coming around through here. So if we needed to add power or more lighting or whatever, we'd have plenty of capacity for that in the future.
What's the elevation change from the front of the stage to back where the sycamore trees are on the north side?
The plan is to have about 2.5 feet from the front of the stage up to the stage. And then from stage level back to the street, there's probably about a foot, maybe 1.5 feet of fall.
Lloyd, I have a question, and this one, I don't know how, I just kind of wanted to get a feel for the placement of the stage, mostly because, you know, the reference that you made, and I know that others have made, is in regards to like if there was a concert or something along those lines. But if you were to have a concert, like basically from 3 p.m. on, you're going to get full direct sun on that stage. Is that kind of part of the plan? I just am wondering how that's going to be, okay.
Yeah, it would. Eventually these trees will grow up big enough to provide some shade, but in the immediate future, yeah, it's going to be a little bright and sunny right there.
Okay. As long as there's a long-term strategy, because I think that does limit the utilization of that stage to a certain extent, especially obviously in the height of summer when you've got nonstop sun right beating into your face as a performer, perhaps. So just a thought.
Thank you.
Any further questions, comments?
Maybe I can give a quick update on the ice. So we are trying to work with the rec center on an agreement with them, and the mayor and I met with a couple of the board chairs last week and the new director, Tiff Miller, and went really well. We're going to be presenting to the board here in about 3 weeks a proposal to have them potentially operate the ice. And if that's successful, then we'll come back and talk with you about future RAP tax money that might be able to be spent on construction. But I just want to report that it looks like it's moving forward in a positive way, which would be really, I think, we feel like it's really key to the plaza to have a winter element to make that vibrant also for Main Street in the winter. The elements that are here, we hope we're capturing our activities that are interesting throughout the day and into the evening and all year round. And if we can accomplish that in a way that invites families downtown, I think we're doing what we want to accomplish. We're pretty excited about it.
What will the water feature do in the winter?
It'll be dry. It'll be drained.
Lloyd, could I ask you a question?
Sure.
If we approve this tonight, this is not the final site plan. In other words, there can be some modifications that will come. Are we approving this as this is it? Or are we approving that at this stage, there may be other modifications to this, as you mentioned, maybe the ice, or maybe the lights, LED, that would be added in the future?
Yeah.
I just like some clarification.
For tonight, we're asking for your approval for this phase. And then as things develop further, if the ice comes into play, then we would bring you back a site plan showing the exact configuration of the ice in this southern area. We're envisioning that is the space that it's going to take up right now, but depending on the negotiations with the rec district, that may change a little bit as we hammer out how big it really ought to be. So as that gets refined, yeah, we would bring you back additional information that would have the actual concession building and equipment building on that end of the plaza and the configuration of the skating rink.
So this is an initial beginning phase.
Phase
It
one.
would be approving, phase
Yes.
one like. Is there any further questions from the council?
I just want to say that I appreciate the sensitivity to the budget. I know that we've all worked hard over the last few months working on the city's budget, and I like the fact that we're doing what we can budget-wise going forward, leaving room for those other improvements as we can afford those in the future. So thanks for your work in that regard.
And still investing in the infrastructure around it. That's nice.
Exactly.
Any further questions or comments? Do I
No.
hear a motion?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to make a a motion that we approve the downtown plaza site plan as presented by staff.
So here a second. Any comments? Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Lloyd. It was
Thank you.
unanimous. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, if I might point out, we're on agenda item number 10, and number 21 is adjourn, and I'd like to move that we move as quickly as possible towards 21.
So noted. Thank you.
Thanks.
Chief Ross, would you present the two vehicles that you were wanting us to approve?
Move to approve the two vehicle
Second.
purchases.
Further discussion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you,
For those
Chief.
of you who are here, there are two vehicles replacing two old vehicles with high miles being used in the detective and
Patrol Division.
patrol divisions.
And it's in the budget.
It's within, it's less than our amount that's
Thank you
budgeted, so
for bidding it, or letting local dealerships bid on the contracts, too.
you bet. We'll have a problem with Chargers in the future because performances, doesn't sound like they're going to be able to do that for us in the future, but we'll see.
Thank you, Chief.
Now,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also for the public, this isn't the first time we've seen this. okay?
No.
That's
We
true.
planned for this whole thing in the budget meetings when we passed the budget, so we knew this was coming. This is just the execution of the budget that we've already formed.
Plus, the chief had to talk a long time already tonight.
The less talking, I'm fine with that, so.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Item number 11, Alan Johnson, would you come forward and
Alan has not talked yet tonight.
Tell
so-
us how you
So,
want to
Alan,
spend your
take the time
evening.
you'd like? Thank you.
I'll hold it to half hour, 45 minutes, so there's no
Perfect.
problem. So.
Oh, awesome.
Anyway, Mayor Pro Tem and Council, I appreciate being here tonight. I will say we met as the Power Commission this morning, went across all these three items, and the three of them do come with a favorable recommendation, unanimous favorable recommendation. The first one we have is pole testing. If you remember, we had a company that come in and reinforce some of our 46 kV poles and tested them. We've been working with them. They actually perform a service where they actually come in, will test integrity of every pole. They actually hook it onto a GPS system where we'll have an electronic record of where they are. They will step through this. This $160,000 is what we have in the current budget. It will do something in the magnitude of about 60% of the poles in the city. We've got roughly 5,000 poles. They will not be testing the poles that we've installed in the last 10 or 11 years, and as we've talked about, we've replaced close to 25% of those. So this is going to get us well through the city to see where it is. And what this will allow us to do is do an inventory and give us a quality. We can look at areas that we need to rebuild, needs to focus on. It's a safety issue. We won't have poles falling over in people's yards with the wires on them or linemen climbing at that point. So it would be the Power Commission staff's recommendation that we award Osmosis pole testing $160,000 to come and test the poles up to that $160,000. When we get to the end, we'll have to look at next year's budget to finish the rest of it, and then we can determine where we are, repairs, or what we need to do it into the future. So this is a budgeted item. Like I say, we did have $160,000 identified in our current year budget. So,
Is there any questions from the council?
I'd like to move that we approve.
Just
Excuse
a
me.
moment.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, if I might ask one question. Is this testing going to be specific to our butt-treated poles, or will it be for all of the poles that we have on the system?
it will be all of our wood poles.
Thank you.
I'd like to
Wow,
make a
these
motion that we move to approve this.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Alan.
All right, thank
Would
you.
you go on to the next item?
Yes, I would be glad to.
Num-
The next one is you'll remember this spring, we went out to bid for a boring company. And boring companies where they, instead of the open trenching, they actually have a directional way they can push a pipe down into the ground and they hook onto conduits, pull conduits back. We did go out and got several bids and went through a competitive bid process, and we did come back, and Americom was the low bid on that process. And just to put it, while we chose to look at Americom again, there's a map there on the third page. And this is the area that's down by now the new Culvers, or where J&L was. The area in yellow is, we already have a part of the original bid in March that they haven't finished. The area in blue has been completed during the construction of Culver's. There's a piece, that these red pieces here, that will tie back in, which will give us the ability to start tying a made feeder back from down by the, I'll call it the Costco area, back up and around to Second North to give us a backup for that area that we don't currently have. So basically, while they were down working, we'd ask for it. But while we were at it, we have found a couple areas where we've got distribution problems, and we've asked them to give us a bid on those. And then also the streetlight fee, where we had areas, we've asked them to come give us the 5 areas to get ahead of where the street department's going to be working, so we would have new conduits, so we wouldn't be digging the road up right after they fix the new road on those. Again, AmeriCom has been great to work with. They've consented to do it for the same basically cost per distance and their mobilization of each time they have to bore. And so it'd be the Power Commission staff's recommendation that we extend AmeriCom's for the $314,435. Again, these are all budgeted items that we have within our current year's budget. So.
Point of
questions?
personal privilege, I just want to ask, I want to challenge Councilman Higginsman to come up with some pun about boring.
It really is.
Ah,
I'm not that quick.
he did though.
I
He said, "It really
knew he could come up with something. Thanks.
Thank you. Alan, was AmeriCom competitive? I mean, were they a low bid in the original bidding process?
Yeah, they were the low bids.
So you're comfortable extending this contract with them, that we're getting the best value?
I am. Like I say, as we went out, they were the low bid. They've been great to work with, and they basically just took the same rates and applied it to the mobilization of each time plus the distance and everything, and gave us the same rate that we had before. So.
One other odd question, was the conduit in front of the Culver's development, was it just trenched in? Or did they bore that?
No, they trenched that. Culver's actually did that. Part of it was they moved the road back, they had it open, they installed the conduit through that piece there.
Just curious about that. Thank you.
Any further questions or comment from the council? Do I have a motion?
Sure. Move to approve the extension of the contract for a total amount of $314,435.
Have a second? Any further comments? Let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It was unanimous. Thank you.
All right.
Alan, would you move on to the next item on a purchase of a truck?
Yeah, this is not actually the truck. This is just the bed for a truck. As we find all of our trucks when we send them, this is the truck we're looking at is one that we use for our substation people. And so it's got the bed on the back where we keep tools and everything. There's a 180-day period from the time we're ordering these to where they're done. So we're actually ordering the bed before we get the truck ordered for it. So this is just the bed portion. So we did go out to bid for this. We had four different beds with 2 different suppliers. The low bid came from Mountain States Industrial Supply with a BG service body. We do have several of those bodies, and they have worked really well for us in the past, and they are the low bid. The amount is what we had identified in the budget. We will be back a month from now with some vehicles, which will include the truck that would hook to this, which we anticipate will come in much sooner than what the bed will actually be here for it. So it'd be the Power Commission staff's recommendation that we approve the low bid from Mountain States Industrial for $35,862 for this purchase.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Why
Thank-
such a long lead time on those? Just out of curiosity.
It is, I've never heard that. All I know is we started hearing it and we started talking to them. That's what they all affirmed. And I don't know if it's the metal tariffs that's doing it. I don't have an answer. I just
So it's
know
not-
it's a fact.
That's not typical, like in years past.
No, and typical in years past, it has not been that bad. We've been able to get them in about 3 months. So that's a long time. So
It is.
I'm not sure what it is, but
Okay.
they were all giving us that same time of lead time. So I'm glad we kind of got ahead of it, or we'd be sitting here, I'll say, in trouble when June comes around and we didn't have the whole piece put together. So.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate it.
And while I've got you, just one quick update on the 138 process. We are scheduled to take the south transformer out of service on the 15th of September and start that second phase. So we'll be back to just the one transformer up and through some between Christmas and Thanksgiving, somewhere in that time frame when it comes back together. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that our new one holds together and we don't have any close calls like we did on the last one. So
Think cool weather thoughts.
cool weather thoughts. All righty.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Alan.
you, Al. Thank you. Could we move on to item number 14? Consider the preliminary site plan approval for a 12-plex multi-family unit. Chad?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. This is an application for preliminary site plan approval for a 12-unit multifamily development. The location of that development is on the screen. There, it's the corner of First South and First West. This is an application that follows up on your recent changes to the downtown zone. We've reviewed that application and found that it meets all the standards of that newly adopted downtown zone standards, including the architecture standards that you adopted, height, the 2-to-1 width to height ratio, all those things that you had adopted. Just to give you a quick idea of what that will look like.
Oh, that's going to look nice.
It's going to look a lot like Sweden, a lot like Sweden, yeah.
Summer in Sweden.
Wait, there it is.
That's not as cute.
That's not as cute, is it?
Classy. I think it
But it's
looks
not
really
bad.
classy.
So it's a continuation. We found that it's compatible with the existing development without being exactly the same. We've looked at looked at all the architectural elements, the parking. This is a copy of the site plan. The site will utilize parking that's already been constructed, along with just a little bit of extra parking here that'll be constructed as part of this development. It does share some parking with the existing sixplex and mixed-use development there. So there will be the need for shared parking agreements or joint use parking and/or combining of the parcels, which is one of the conditions. Really, this project meets the code, so we don't have a lot more to say about it. There's 3 conditions related to landscaping, parking, or consolidation of the parcels, and we expect this will come back to you for final very soon, next time. So with that, the Planning Commission has reviewed this and recommends approval.
Any discussion by the council?
Move to approve preliminary site plan.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, it was unanimous. Chad, let's move on to the next item.
Can I ask Chad a question first?
Surely.
Chad, the corner south of the one we just discussed, there was a project that seemed to be chomping at the bit to go in there. What happened?
The bit was not being chomped quite as much as we thought, yeah.
Okay.
So it was still out there, but
Didn't they start scraping that parcel recently?
they did, and we think that'll be finished up very, very soon, the scraping, but the project will still have to go through review. We haven't seen a project submitted yet on that one.
Thanks.
We've had some discussions. The previous plans did not meet the code, so we had to give them back, and they're working on the plan still, so.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, this next application is an application for preliminary site plan review and approval for an addition to the existing Alpha Graphics building. This is the existing Alpha Graphics building that I'm showing there on the screen with my cursor kind of hovering over it. This project will also include the lot to the south there on 3rd South. So you can see that existing building that will be removed and replaced with a new building that will be, I'll show you here in just a moment. Those parcels will be consolidated. And let me show you what that project looks like. Again, looks just like a village in Sweden. This is a copy of the elevations for that building. It's a very attractive building. It still meets those architectural standards that you adopted, but in a different way. They just chose a different way to do it. So we feel really happy about that. We tried to create those standards in a way that it didn't require one look and feel down there. They've managed to meet them in a different way than the previous building we just looked at. So this has got the articulation that we talked about, the ins and outs, the ups and downs that are required by code. They did make, one of our conditions of approval talks about the this south side of the building. They have enhanced the architecture and the windows and things on there to meet the code. So that addresses one of the conditions. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But this is, again, just some different views of that building. You can see they've got some projections, some recesses to try to meet that architectural code. We appreciate that. I'm going to go back to one other set of plans. This is the site plan. And just to explain that site plan a little bit, this is the existing building shown in the cross-hatching. The building will actually be expanded into this kind of a footprint I'm outlining there with my cursor. There'll be, again, a building will be right up to the corner, which we think is in keeping with the vision for the downtown. They'll have the Alpha Graphics building here located on the north side, and then a small tenant improvement space on the southwest corner there of the two streets. I think that's all I wanted to show you. We do have, well, one other thing, there will be a need for an easement from the city. In order to make storm drainage work for this site, there has to be an off-site storm drain line that'll be extended across the soccer field on the west side. That'll connect to the existing storm drain system in Maine. So that will have to be installed as part of this application.
And that will be installed by the
It's
builder?
installed by the developer, and they'll gain an easement, an agreement for that through us. Yep, yep. So with that, there are a few conditions. I'll just go through those really quickly. We need to consolidate the two parcels. We had a couple little revisions related to the disabled person parking space, some landscape revisions. They have demonstrated, to number 5, they've demonstrated how the plan meets that code section for that south face. We appreciate that. And then we'll have to have that easement in place. So we are recommending approval of this for preliminary site plan, and the Planning Commission has reviewed it and also forwards a recommendation of approval with the conditions. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the council?
I just wanted to make a comment. I love that modern look that they went with. I think it's great.
It's a nice-looking building.
Yeah. Anyway, that was my comment.
I do have one comment. Chad, can you go back to the utility drawing?
Yep.
The contractor is anxious to get started on this, but they have been a little bit slow getting their plans in here. And as you know, it may be the end of August and it may be 85 degrees, but winter is coming. And he realizes that in order for this building to be completed when they would like to be in the springtime, that drainage system needs to be in. Well, we have a moratorium on excavating in the streets starting October 15th. And yesterday he was in requesting that once this is granted preliminary approval, if he might be able to extend the line up the street, and it's on the very top part of that drawing, that little green line up at the very top part. Possibly before this is able to get back here for final site plan approval. He would just go up the street and then stub it to the south into the property, but not extend the line south across the city's property, which is now the soccer field. I indicated to him that though my time was short, his time was shorter as far as getting this construction done, and we would probably be willing to work with him on the basis of a preliminary approval if we had final approvable drawings and engineering for that outfall line, if that's okay with council.
That sounds
I
like a
think
great
that's
idea.
reasonable, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any further comments, questions? Do we have a motion?
Move to grant preliminary site plan approval for the Alpha Graphics building and addition with the 6 conditions listed.
Second.
Any
This is
discussion?
exciting. I'm really excited about this project.
Let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It passed unanimously. Chad, let's go on to number 16.
Thanks. We'll make this one really quick. This is a follow-up to your decision that you made at your last meeting related to private schools in the downtown zone. As we indicated at that meeting, we needed to follow that up with an ordinance. This is that ordinance. We have proposed that this be a conditional use. That means it's an allowed use, subject to a conditional use permit process. The applicant is aware of that, and they've actually already gone through that process. They were approved last night at the administrative committee, contingent on this being finalized tonight. So there's no need to hold a public hearing on this item. You held your public hearings. The Planning Commission and City Council held theirs at the last meeting. So this is simply just a decision if you agree with that recommendation. That recommendation for it to be a conditional use is based on that's what every other zone that allows private schools has for this use. And we also do feel that there are some potential impacts from a school use. So it does justify having a conditional use rather than just permitted. So with that, we are recommending approval of ordinance number, what was it, 2018-08.
First of all, I like the conditional use designation, and I'd be happy to move that we adopt ordinance 2018-08, allowing private schools in the downtown zone.
Second.
No further comments? We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It was unanimous. Thank you.
Nay.
Thank you.
Nay. I have the record. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 yeas and 1 nay.
Thank you.
Let's move on. Number 17. Paul, would you go over with us the Nathan's subdivision location, please?
The Nathan subdivision. Yes, I will. Thank you very much. If I get the right button here. Okay. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, at our last Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission was able to review this proposal for a 3-lot subdivision at the corner of 325 West and 400 North Street. Currently, there are 2 lots in this area, which make a total parcel area of about it's just under 3/4 of an acre. The proposal is to take those 2 lots and divide it into a third by carving off the north half of the 2 existing lots, which are currently just a garden area adjacent to the Stone Creek channel. This subdivision, while it's in an existing already improved area, does come with a couple of additional challenges which we need to go over. First of which is Barton Creek. I said Stone Creek. It's Barton Creek and the adjacency to the creek. And the creek presents a couple of problems in that there needs to be an easement provided alongside of the creek for the maintenance of the channel. There is no sewer in front of this lot because of the creek. There was never any sewer extended underneath where that creek culvert goes under the road. So there's no sewer in front of this lot. And there is a floodplain which is created by Barton Creek. Now, as far as the floodplain goes, that can be solved by the developer, the builder, producing an elevation certificate that says they can build a house that's above the flood zone. That's really not a problem. But it does, until that floodplain is modified, eliminate the possibility of a basement, which includes anything but maybe a water heater and a furnace. The developers are aware of this situation, and in fact, if you take a look at it on Google Earth, there's the parcel, and that blue shaded area is what is currently mapped as the flood zone. Council is all aware that the flood zones have been under review by FEMA for the last
25 years?
Yeah, okay, I'll go with 50 years.
Yeah.
And they had promised that that map would be finalized by 3rd quarter of 2018. Now, I don't know if they meant 2118, but 2018 ain't happening. However, they have said 2nd, 3rd quarter of 2019 that floodplain should be remapped, at which time the preliminary mapping that we've seen shows that contained within the walls of the channel, which is just 8 feet wide right along the north side of that property. If no house has been proposed by that time, then, and the floodplain has been changed, build a basement, rock on, no problem. So there is that one situation. The developer is aware of the need for the sewer line, and on this aerial photo, you can see where I've indicated where that sewer line needs to run out to an existing sewer manhole that is right in that intersection. Right through the middle of it is a big old wide, it's about 10 foot wide, 6 foot tall concrete box culvert that they need to get under. They have had engineering done that shows that they can get underneath that if there's no big rocks in the way, and have proper flow out of a basement. So if a house is built that has the potential for a basement, that sewer would be able to work. The last thing in particular in this instance is that there is no fire hydrant within code required distance of this. There is a great big 10-inch diameter pump line in 325 West, but since there was no real houses developed along there, there was no need for fire hydrants, and there are none. So as part of this, the developer will be required to install a fire hydrant across the street, probably on that property line right there, which would then add fire protection, the necessary fire protection. The Planning Commission reviewed this in detail and passes a favorable recommendation approval, preliminary and final approval, with the conditions that are listed, that we get a title report and we get red line corrections taken care of, and many of those have already been taken care of. I discussed the need for the sewer lateral in 325 West, and they would need to do that under bond with the city prior to the issuance of any building permits on there. An elevation certificate, as I said, would be necessary if a building permit is requested before the completion of the flood zone remapping. And they need to obtain the necessary approvals from Davis County Flood Control for the creek easement, because by Davis County ordinance, any development or construction within 100 feet of a creek requires Davis County Flood Control review. So it will need to be reviewed by them. Be glad to answer any questions.
Do they have to get county approval as well for the boring under the creek channel? I know they would if they went over it.
Probably not.
Okay.
They don't worry about that because it's in our street. They say, it's your street. If something goes wrong, it's your street. So they don't worry about that.
Very good.
Unless, of course, they bore
What
right
if
through
they-
the middle of the
Right.
box culvert. Then Davis County will probably get excited.
Okay. Thanks, Paul.
Well, Paul, I appreciate the lovely color aerial photo.
And I appreciate your recognition of the loveliness of that color aerial.
Thank you.
Looks
Any
like a
questions
cloisonne.
or comments by the council?
No.
It's an amoeba.
Thanks for the explanation.
Do we have a motion?
I'll move that we grant preliminary and final subdivision approval for Nathan's subdivision as outlined with the 6 conditions that Paul went through.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The vote was unanimous. Paul, would you continue on with item number 18?
Yes, thank you. And I'd like to start this discussion by looking at another lovely color aerial photograph of this lot located at 3055 South, 600 West. There's a request for an easement release. All of the affected utilities have approved the easement release, and on this photograph, this lovely color aerial photograph, the red section is what is currently under easement, but is requested to be released. There is a section, the east 10 feet of that green area has already been granted as a new easement. So effectively what has happened is the easement has been moved 10 feet farther to the east. All of the utilities that are in that area, in fact, there is a power line that goes across there. All of those affected utilities are in agreement that that's fine, and they have all signed a release for that easement of the release of the 5 feet of the west portion of that easement.
Move to grant the easement request.
Second.
Any further comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show there was none opposed. Let's move on to 19. Consider the approval of JRC Architects for the design of our Bountiful City Hall remodel.
Okay, thank you very much, members, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council.
Just trailing off.
Who
Just
are
trailing
they
off
again?
randomly,
He's already forgotten who we are.
yawning.
I've already, my mouth got way out ahead of where my brain was, way. We're trying to catch up still. Okay. So Lloyd just took a while explaining the what's going forward with the plaza and how that's progressing. It's now time to start thinking about the home court and the money that has been set aside for the remodel of this building. It has served its purpose effectively for the last, it's 41. I think it was 77, 78.
78.
I was an intern here in 77, and the plans were just getting approved for this building. We were still over in
Go out and
the
look at the plaque and determine what date.
78.
Move to
So for the
adjourn.
last 40 years,
To look at the plaque, I mean.
Oh, let's go.
No, we're on the home
Okay.
stretch.
okay, we're on the home stretch, and I've already missed my guess at what time we'd be out. So I can take as long as I want to see who I want to win upon. Okay. We recently went through a process of requesting proposals from our local architectural community. 6 proposals were submitted. 5 proposals were submitted. There were a bunch. And as each of the members of the selection committee reviewed all of those proposals, one proposal stood out head and shoulders above the rest. Our original intention was to invite a couple of them to interview so that we could get to know them better. But after reviewing their proposals, it was decided that the one that stood out above the rest, we already knew because they had recently finished the remodel of the power department's building. And we all like what they did. We've worked with JRCA on several other projects also, but it was felt that it really wasn't necessary to go through the interview process, put them through that expense, and another company that probably didn't have much of a chance of getting it anyway through the expense and time of doing that. So it was felt that we would bring the recommendation to the council to select JRCA as the architects to do the plans for the remodel of this city hall. After we had reviewed their qualifications, we opened everybody's pricing, and they were all about the same. Pricing standard in this area is about 6%, 5.5%, 6% of the actual construction cost. And that's where they came in, was right at 6%. So they were in with the norm as far as pricing. So the selection team comes with a recommendation that JRCA be selected to be the architect for the remodel of City Hall, and we proceed with that process as soon as possible.
So assuming this goes as planned, what is the timeline?
The timeline for this would be that actually on the 10th, so a week from next Monday, we sit down with the architects and start establishing what we anticipate the scope of this project to be. Sometime around the first part of October, going out and selecting a construction manager, general contractor, as we have done in the past, so that we can get that contractor's eyes on the project as the design proceeds. Anticipating that by about the 1st of January-ish, there would be a concept to bring to the city council that would include what could be done for the budget that has been set for this project. Anticipate that it would probably just be contained inside the 4 walls of the building. Don't think that there's a lot of money to go out and put lipstick on the pig. It will be, there is adequate money to do a very nice remodel of the interior, make it possibly so that the front door doesn't open to a blank wall, meet current ADA codes, make sure that everything meets current seismic and building codes, access is proper. Our audio-visual system is up to 21st century standards. But there's probably not a lot of money in that budget to do a lot of cosmetics to the outside. We'll know better as we get with the architect and the CMGC. But that will be about the 1st of January. Anticipate that over the next several months, final plans and construction documents will be prepared so that May-ish, the staff will pack up, move out of the building. The anticipation is that the entire building will be empty and available for wholesale demolition and reconstruction. Then about a 12-month construction period, 12 to 14-month would be my guess. And then moving back in sometime fallish, 3rd quarter 2020.
I do have a question / comment. Thanks, Paul, by the way, for this. Two things. The first thing is that if there is any anticipation of maybe at least just obviously reconfiguring some of this for maybe a area than what is currently out there for people to gather. That would be something that I think would be of value. I don't know how much that's involved in the process. I'm sure that there's some discussion, so I just think that could be really valuable. And then the second thing is a little more lighthearted. I just love the photo that they supplied, but I think we should maybe upgrade it enough to not have the garbage cans out front anymore. Just saying.
That has been, you know what? You're not the first one that has
What?
noticed
I know.
that lovely set of garbage cans along, what is actually the front door.
Right.
I know.
Actually, the front door.
Right.
And as far as reallocating the space inside, we anticipate that this thing will be nothing but columns and walls, exterior walls. There probably won't be any reason to keep any of the interior walls except this portion of the building naturally lends itself to a larger gathering area because the roof is physically higher right through here. So you're able to have a little bit more volume as far as a meeting space. So I would guess that will probably remain here. But as far as reconfiguring the lobbies, absolutely. In fact, I guarantee that will happen because of the accessibility requirements which will have to be met.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if this is part of the process, and I, just curious, but I'm not sure how this final thing would lay out on the inside space, but if there is a way to move the split entry look further west just a little bit to expand that. That's kind of what I was thinking, but I hear what you're saying too. So anyway, thank you. I just wanted to make that kind of a comment.
Isn't mid-century modern kind of the retro thing now?
It is, but mid-century modern does not like split entry.
Mid-century ugly doesn't work? Come on.
Any further comments or questions from the council?
No, they've all been really good.
Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to make a motion that we consider approval of the selection, or that we grant approval of the selection of JRCA Architects as the designers of the Bountiful City Hall remodel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let it be known it's unanimous. We have one more item to consider.
Kendallin, did you vote?
No, but in my mind, I said yes, so I say yes.
Well, apologize. I
Sorry.
thought I heard you say yes. I apologize. But you did say yes?
I say yes.
I say yes. Okay, then it's,
After the fact.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, can we have a roll call on that vote?
okay, let's have a roll call. Let's start with Richard.
Nay. Just kidding. I'd like to
Wait,
change
you
my vote to
seconded.
aye.
Richard.
Aye.
Richard.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, aye, aye.
Thank you.
No, we're not speaking pirate. No,
Aye.
Included now?
Aye. Yes.
Beautiful.
there's no pirate here. Okay.
Let's move on to item 20.
One.
No, we can't jump over 20. I'm sorry. We have to go to 20 first.
I'm sorry
Consider-
it's late. I'm sorry.
21st?
Oh, no worries.
The
I just,
21st. You got me
I just
there.
didn't
I'm
hear.
paying attention.
Consider ordinance 2018-08. Clint.
You guys are making me feel self-conscious. I will try not to get too entrenched in this, and I promise not to be boring.
Some of us didn't get a
Tip
nap.
your waiter. That was awesome.
Okay,
As the
here we go.
address.
We can always count on Clint.
Here's the deal. This is a small cell ordinance. Last legislative session, the state legislature passed a law that basically said that that cities must allow for small cell technology within the rights of way. What that means is that there is a growing population in Utah, as we all know, and there is a growing demand for cellular and data services. And the macro cell towers, the big tall monopoles and other types of towers that we see around town and throughout the state are pretty much at capacity, and there's new technology that's emerging that is able to handle the demands of more localized areas, and that's through small cells. So what that is basically it's going to be smaller poles and also attachments to our own poles. Different types of technology that will allow for better cell phone service throughout the city. Where that benefits Bountiful City is I'm told that there are areas up on the east where you get into some of the ravines or different areas and maybe the cell service isn't so great. This type of thing can target those deficiencies and make cellular and data much more of a comprehensive coverage throughout the city. So I have provided to you in the packet a draft of a small cell ordinance that was provided to the public and to you as part of the city council packet. And then I emailed all of you with an update to that. I got additional comments from planning, engineering, and power. And so I emailed you a second draft detailing the changes. There weren't many, but for the benefit of the public, if anybody has read through that, I'll just go ahead and point them out. There were some formatting and grammatical corrections, which is common as you make some changes. Included a table of contents to be consistent with the rest of the municipal ordinance. Added some additional design standards, particularly regarding underground facilities, just requiring new different types of wiring and fibers to be underground. Added a section of additional requirements that address things like insurance and bonding, indemnity, electrical service. Power wanted to make sure that each of these poles will be metered and monitored, and so made a change there to just make that a little bit more clear. Added a couple of minor changes to the application and review process, and then we added a section 111, which is only 2 or 3 paragraphs, which just deals with enforcement of the ordinance, remedies, and abandonment. Mainly what would happen if a company came in, put in a system, and then decided they didn't want it anymore. You know, what are we going to do with it? So those were the changes that were made. I'm happy to go through the whole thing with you if you would like. And then I do have a comment about I did get one comment from the industry, but before I do that, is there anything, would you like me to go through the ordinance or just hit the, summarize it? What do you want me to do?
I think summary is sufficient.
Okay. So I'll just give you a brief summary of what we got. It's just describes the scope and the purpose, the authority, what it applies to. One of the things that we did during the legislative session was fought really hard to ensure that they cannot attach to our power poles. That was a big deal for our power department. That was a big deal for a lot of other power departments for a number of reasons. But this ordinance specifically spells out that they will not be able to attach to our power poles.
Until the legislature changes the law again.
That one, there's a lot of cities that don't want that to happen, so I think it's going to be difficult for that to pass, but it could, for sure. It talks about definitions, just defining the various different types of terms for the technology, the parties, things like that. Orders, rules, and regulations, this is important. Basically, you as the council in section 105 grant the city and the staff the ability to adopt orders, rules, and regulations that accomplish the goals of this ordinance. Different application forms, different agreements that might be required, different, if they're going to get into the right of way, then they may need to do an excavation permit, things like that. Section 106 addresses a master license agreement. That's something that I'm still in the process of drafting, and we'll get that to you soon, but we'll probably just address it. I'll probably draft it, come up with our form, and then just as we get applications, we'll present those to the council for approval. But the master license agreement is something that's going to spell out in a little bit more detail the insurance requirements, maintenance requirements, design standards, things like that, the aesthetics. And then section 107 is just talking about the use of the right-of-way, defines the right-of-way, how it is a permitted use. Section 108 goes over the design standards, and then here's where I want to point one thing out. I did get an email from an attorney representing Verizon and indicated that they had a problem, a concern about section 11-4-108, subsection D, which is the separation distance. And they pointed out to me the code section that says that we cannot adopt a minimum separation distance. So I am suggesting to you that we remove subsection D from that section, which will also change the numbering of the rest of the chapter, but I'll go ahead and do that upon your motion. Just wanted to make the council aware that it does spell out for design districts and historic districts, and that there are different standards that apply to that. So Plat A, things that we've identified that are important, that we have spent a lot of time and effort in developing a certain look and feel. We can adopt more stringent standards that will address that. Another one would be up by the Bountiful Temple, where a lot of thought and detail has gone into ensuring that there's a good aesthetic view there too. So we've addressed those. What I added in the second draft that I sent you was additional requirements, and most of that is just talking about insurance and bonding, indemnity, the electrical service, what I had talked about before. Section 109 is the permitting and application review process. That one is nearly identical, with the suggestion from planning that we change a couple of the words. And then I got a suggestion from engineering that included with our application should be some photographs of the proposed locations. That's helpful when we go in and want to inspect the right-of-way. We can see if there's been any damage that's been done to it. So we added those two things in. Almost done. Damage and repair, that's section 110. That just talks about what happens if it's damaged, how do we deal with that. And then that section that I had talked about, section 111, just the enforcement and remedies, when it would be considered abandoned and how the systems would be removed. So as I said, I did get that email, and you all got it too. You were all included on that email, but the email, they basically just made 3 points. The one was that there can't be a minimum separation distance. I've made that change for you there. The other one is that just a clarification about some licensing. Basically, there's some licenses they can't get until we issue a permit, so I just added a sentence that says that we can waive certain requirements on federal licensing until a permit is issued, but they're still required to provide proof that they get it. And then the last one is the historic and design districts. They were just concerned that there's a pre-application meeting that we've built into the ordinance that basically says before they do anything with regard to the design districts and the historic districts that I've talked about, Bountiful, Temple, and Plat A, that they'll meet with us first. And they just wanted to make sure that there's certain federal, they call it a shot clock, but federal time frames that things have to be done within. They just wanted to make sure that that was included, that the time frame is running while we have those meetings. So I would suggest making those changes that I've just discussed, and our recommendation is that we adopt it. Most of it just mirrors the state law. We've just added in additional things that give, the small discretionary ability that we have within the state code. For example, the ability to meter, the ability to designate design districts and historic districts, the ability to ask that they implement processes that take into account aesthetics as much as possible and minimize the visual effect as much as possible. We've incorporated that into the ordinance. Any other questions or any questions?
Any questions from the council?
Thanks for being so nimble, Clint,
Yeah.
getting the changes done.
It's and I'll tell you, it's a new thing. The state law goes into effect on September 1st, and so all cities are passing these in this week and last week, and we'll see how it goes. We may get applications immediately. We may not get them for a year or so. So we'll see what happens.
So, Clint, any idea on this $250 per pole revenue per year?
No idea. It's just going to be depending on who is interested and who makes application. I think if we do get an application, it will probably be from Verizon first. They've been pretty interested in Bountiful City and have been in contact with us for quite some time. A lot of these companies really wanted to start moving forward a year or two ago, but when the state passed this legislation, they enacted it but didn't make the effective date until September 1st. So everything's just kind of been on hold all year. And I think Salt Lake City will be the first, and will probably be bombarded, and we'll learn from them and do what we can.
Any further questions from the council? We have a motion.
Move to adopt ordinance 2018-09 as printed with the changes that Clint has enumerated for us.
We have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let's note that is unanimous. Item number 21. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'm assuming it's
To
going to be
adjourn?
unanimous. Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will.
Ooh.